nobody's thinking about you as much, even a fraction of how much you're thinking about yourself. Everybody's analyzing themselves and in their own heads. And I mean, how many times have we circled back with someone and said about that email or about how I said that, a year ago or whatever. And people are like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
On this episode of the Mental Healness Podcast, we're breaking the cycle. Psychologist Leah Marone joins Lee Hammock to unpack the truths behind imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and the pressure to always perform. If you're ready to care for your mind, set better boundaries, and finally breathe, this episode is for you.
What is going on, beautiful folks? Welcome to another episode of the Mental Healness Podcast, where we talk about all things mental health. If you're new here, my name is Lee Hammock. I'm someone that's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and I use my platform to raise awareness for all things mental health related, to get the conversation started and to end the stigma. Today, we have a very special guest for y'all. We have Mrs. Leah Marone. She is a psychologist, a Yale Clinical Instructor, and corporate mental wellness consultant with over 20 years of experience. So she knows what she's talking about. As a former Division I athlete, she specializes in high achievers struggling with imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and performance anxiety. Has conducted over 20,000 therapy sessions and contributed to Psychology Today, Newsweek, and The Atlantic. She works with organizations on burnout prevention, boundary setting, and emotional intelligence. A sought-after speaker, Leah has presented her support Don't Solve framework to leaders nationwide. Her new book, Serial Fixer, explores the hidden patterns of overfunction and how to break free. Thank you so much, Leah. Thank you. Welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
I'm great. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. So introduce yourself. I know I read your bio. I know it does not do you justice. So,
oh gosh,
do you?
Well, let's see. I mean, I have a private practice. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and so I specialize in anxiety disorders, and I do work with a lot of athletes, high performers, serial fixers, and that's kind of my clinical hat. And then I'm really kind of similar to you, where I'm really just living and breathing mental health, right? Not only for myself, but trying to create space for people in corporations and nonprofits, educators, and just really educate and support around issues around boundaries, around overextension, around just burnout. So I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants, but I'm loving it because it's all things mental health. And I think it's such a huge, and always has been a huge topic in how we function as humans.
Oh, yay. I didn't know you were based in Charlotte, though. I saw on your site you were doing a TEDx, and it said, I say TEDx Mallard Creek. I was like, that's Mallard Creek in Charlotte? I didn't know if it was, so I'm in North Carolina as well. I live in Durham. Okay. My twin brother's a teacher in Charlotte. Oh, super small world. I was like, wait, Charlotte. Yeah, okay, super small world. Far. Yeah. So, speaking of imposter syndrome, what exactly is imposter syndrome, and like how does it apply to like mental health and things like that?
Yeah, it's such a it's one of those buzz phrases that's been around. Just kind of. It's gotten a lot of limelight, I think, the last few years, which rightfully so. And, there's been a lot of discrepancies of like, is it really a thing? Is it not? And the way I like to phrase it is, syndrome sounds sometimes a little over dramatic, but it's like the protective parts of us, like our internal bodyguards, whether it's the critic in us, the pleaser in us, that almost is working too hard. Right? It's almost feeding us these false narratives or futuristic, like what ifs that are interwoven with anxiety to, keep us like on high alert, to keep us over prepared. So we kind of step into a new role, we step into a scenario, we step into something in life, and automatically, it ignites this critic in us that's like, ooh, are you ready for this? Like, something might happen and you might feel things that collectively humans don't like to feel, like ill-equipped or embarrassed or, this sense of failure, all these things. So it is like this internal alert system that is trying to protect us, but it's feeding us kind of these scenarios that tend to trigger anxiety and self-doubt. And we begin to question and not really utilize our strengths and resilience. So it's a whole like shift of just where we want to be and how we want to deliver. And it's very negative.
Mm. So is it the way you described it? I liked how you put the emphasis on the syndrome word, because I think when people add syndrome to it, you automatically make it seem like people automatically make it seem like it's something bad, like it's a dark cloud. But the way you described it made it seem like it starts off as some type of form of self-protection. and whatnot. Is that true right there? What do you think about that?
It is. It is. And typically people who are, kind of suffering from, this like imposter syndrome or just this self-doubt. I mean, you really have to look and take a step back and think, well, these people are first and foremost pushing themselves. They're stepping out into something that's unknown. They're taking a risk. They've accepted an invitation for something that is not scripted, that is not, something that they maybe have a ton of reps with and feel comfortable with. And so just that alone is huge. And I think needs to be validated, because people that are suffering from kind of this cyclical internal criticism, imposter syndrome, it's because they're doing something that it's not habit yet. It's not something that's comfortable. And that right there is huge. So I think just even stepping back, and if you're someone where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm always in my head, I'm always self-doubting, I'm always this, it's like, well, okay, that's because you're probably also pushing yourself, which is awesome. You're not stagnating.
That's powerful right there. I like how you put that, because as soon as I have a personality disorder. So when I hear imposter syndrome and I hear the voices in my head telling me, it's typically like negative self-talk, it's when I'm doing something that I feel like I need to be doing. Right. Even when I was starting this podcast, I had wrote down a list of things like my limiting beliefs, and I was just like, nobody's going to want to be on it. Nobody's going to listen to it. Are you ready to talk to people and stuff like that? Nobody's going to talk to you. You're going to flub your words. And there was all this stuff right here just telling me I didn't deserve to do this, or this is going to fail, even before I started it. And because I've been in therapy so long, I know those, I can recognize the warning signs and like, okay, well, my body is telling me this. It's something that I absolutely need to do. It's something that's outside of my comfort zone. And I kind of use it as a guideline to make sure I'm on the right path sometimes right there. So I like how you put that right there. It's just like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. I was always interested in imposter syndrome, because I hear people say that when they're in toxic relationships as well, or toxic workplaces, they feel like they don't deserve something, or like they're having like somewhat of an out of body experience sometimes as well. And they shut down, Do you experience that right there? Because I know you help high achievers and things like that, and I think do a lot of high achievers experience this imposter syndrome.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of sometimes where it's confusing, because you think of, how we collectively and culturally define success. Like, it's a lot of times the most successful people in our eyes are dealing and kind of really working hard at combating some of that internal turmoil and that imposter syndrome, because they are constantly taking risks and putting themselves out there. And I love how you were vulnerable and shared, like, just when you started the podcast, like, what if no one listens? What if this? What if this? And that too, if you really take a step back, like, that is the part of your brain, like the protective part, that's actually doing its job. It's coming in it's like working in overtime and giving you 10 bodyguards when you need one. But like, it's doing its job. But that's, once you have that realization of like, okay, this is the task of this part of my brain, to overprotect me, to feed me a slew of what if scenarios that are incredibly overdramatic, and for me to be as prepared as I can. And that, though, if you're not aware of that and kind of almost validate those protective parts of you, and you're like, hey, you're working really hard, I appreciate you, but if you could scale back a little bit, so those parts of me that are confident, those parts of me that can access like stuff that I've done in the past, like, we may be able to recalibrate and actually do some good things. So I think it's amazing that you shared that, because I've definitely experienced that as an athlete, as a speaker, all the things. And it's learning how to soothe and work with that part of you, rather than kind of thinking, what the hell's wrong with me? Does anyone else experience this? And yes, it does. They do.
Yeah, I love how you put the 10 bodyguards. We only need one, because that's literally how my mind, it's like, I'm surrounded by my thoughts, and it's like, I can't breathe sometimes. So it's just not, sometimes it would feel like it's easier to just not do it than to face that anxiety or that pressure of actually doing it. And then like, one of those bodyguards is telling you that you're going to fail, and you don't want to validate that bodyguard. Like, you're going to fail, right? If you do this, you're going to fail. And then if you have a slip up, you just validate that right there, and it can make you shut down right there. And I think a lot of people in this situation feel like they have to be perfect when they're taking on new tasks and whatnot. I know you specialize in, helping people, deal with the, how do I phrase this? Helping people deal with being perfectionists. Like how to help people stop being perfectionists. Is that where I'm going?
Yeah, or
correct?
just again, kind of looking at like perfectionism again.
Mhm.
It's like anything, if there's too much or too little, it's like we want to find that sweet spot, right? And so it is like those perfectionistic tendencies and maybe even just anxious thought patterns. They serve us well in a lot of ways. Like they keep you going, they keep you pushing forward, they keep you productive. But when it comes in too strong, that's when we, get pushed out of the present and are too engulfed in the futuristic thinking or rehashing the past. And so many overthinkers and so many people with perfectionistic tendencies, myself included, I think we also get so fixated on what other people might be categorizing us as, or like the stamp that they're giving us, or if we say something or do something that's not maybe executed perfectly, that we've kind of ruined everyone's vision of us. And if you think about it, that's pretty egocentric in some respects. And we're really just in our own head. And I have to constantly remind people I work with and myself on occasion that like nobody is thinking about you as much, even a fraction of how much you're thinking about yourself. Everybody's analyzing themselves and in their own heads. And I mean, how many times have we circled back with someone and said, about that email or about how I said that, a year ago or whatever. And people are like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like people are not that in that cycle of overanalyzing as much as we are with ourselves. And sometimes that can be a very comforting thing to kind of soothe that part of us that is just very egocentric and wanting to execute and be on everyone's good graces.
I face that right there a lot though. Like what you just said about how people, you're thinking about something you said 5 years ago and how it might have came off wrong. I faced that all the time. I was like, why did I say that so long ago? I bet this person hates me for that. And because now I'm on this kind of self-enrichment, personal growth journey, I'll go back and talk to somebody about that. And they're just like, huh? Like I literally what you just said, they like, you still think about that? Like you just reminded me of it. Now I am angry because you said that. So sometimes it can't. Sometimes you unintentionally restart a fire that was already put out and people have forgot about. So I do battle that type of stuff right there. It's like on a consistent basis, just like, well, how did I say this wrong? Would that be what you refer to as the inner critic in your work? I know you help people deal with the inner critic. Would that be kind of on that same like plateau right there?
Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, it is. It's kind of that if you think about different filters that we use to process information, and a lot of us with fierce inner critics, it is. It's kind of that very critical, kind of sometimes perfectionistic, like this isn't good enough. People are going to think this, that filter again can be very productive in keeping us productive. But when it's overused or we're not able to kind of calm it down, it keeps us on high alert all the time. We're just in that like always being on state and very driven sometimes by motives that aren't necessarily ones that we can achieve.
So how do people become perfectionists? Like, how does that even begin?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's kind of there's the nature nurture, right? So we have some of that is biologically wired and how we're kind of predispositioned for that neurologically and just by, from a biology standpoint, but also just how we're raised and who models for us and how we're parented and who we're around a lot, growing up and kind of the messages and kind of the associations that we make at a very young age. And, if we are, given and kind of feel that sense of connection, if we're praised, when we execute well, when we're 5 steps ahead, when we get those grades, when we do X, Y, and Z, and things are very performance based. We do from a very young age, we start to make those associations and, success equals performance, success equals this. And we get so wrapped up in that. And I think a lot of perfectionistic tendencies stems from very rigid thinking. We kind of find ourselves in that very black or white thinking, that all or nothing thinking. And it's really a struggle sometimes, and we can get there, but finding the gray, finding that middle ground and really balancing and soothing that critical part of us with, kind of another part of us that might be trying to protect something else, like our peace, referring to things that we are doing correctly or that we have gotten through and that we're not supposed to get through everything gracefully. That's not the way life works.
I think it's super important, like especially one of the last lines you should say, you're not supposed to get through everything gracefully, because like, again, on my own personal journey, I feel like if I don't do it 100% correct, I just completely shut down and just kind of log out of it because I see it as a failure. Like people are going to judge me on that one little thing. Like even though I'm talking to you, if I stutter, I'm like, scrap the whole episode. Just like, that's how my mind goes. If I don't say a sentence perfectly or I lose my words, like my mind immediately goes into kind of self-defense attack mode. And it's like, you have to be perfect. Like, you can't flub your words. You can't stutter. You can't, say something wrong or do something incorrect. Just even my own inner critic, like, so based on society's standards and whatnot, I will beat myself to death about that. And I'm just like, how do you battle something? How do you deal with that right there? It's like that, just that own internal personal battle that, like, I know not just I experience, but a lot of people experience right there when you are wired to try to be a perfectionist and then you do fail or you don't do something perfect. Like, how do you battle that right there?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure as you're talking, so many people are like, yes, I can completely relate to that. And it's really thinking about that inner critic, if you will. Like, there's a lack of trust. There's a lack of trust with that protected part of us that we're going to be able to recover. It's all about recovery, right? So it's about, we know if we really think logically, if we're entering, if we're doing something like we're, playing soccer or we're doing a sport or we're doing something where it's like, this is kind of based on mistakes and capitalizing on other people's mistakes. And we're not going to be perfect with everything. We know these things logically. Even going into a podcast, we're going to fumble on our words every now and again. Like, logically, we kind of know that. But I think it's the emotional part. It's the inner critic within us that really is doubting that we're going to be able to recover. That if we fumble on our words, if we don't get our point across perfectly, if we, fumble the ball, if we do X, Y, or Z that wasn't according to plan, that part of us is scared shitless that we are not going to be able to recover. And I think that's the part right there. It's not about executing perfectly. It's about knowing and believing and getting the repetitions in and the self-talk to acknowledge that I have the ability, when I fumble, when I mess up, when I misstep, that I'm going to be able to recover. And that's resilience right there.
Mm-hmm. So that's what I actually have to do now. Right now, focus on my breath work. I'll take a deep breath and just like, it's not the end of the world. I have to repeat this kind of my internal mantras and things like that. It's like, no, not the end of the world. And also, when I do mess up and then I correct it, I just kind of have to validate myself. I kind of have to pat myself on the back and just like, good job. It's not the end of the world. That way, like for future reference, I like, remember this happened and you conquered it or you got past it. It's just like, I have to have this internal dialogue with myself to validate myself, like you said, like get your reps in. The repetition has helped out a lot over my, my own personal growth and mental health journey. I feel like my therapist has helped me out with that a lot as well. Which leads me to my next question. What led you to becoming a psychotherapist?
Ooh, gosh, a number of things. But I think, my mom is a psychotherapist. So I kind of was watching her as I was growing up. She was kind of doing her final grad school years and her practicum. So I was watching my mother kind of go through all that as I was growing up. And I've just always been fascinated with people's stories. And I've felt like it's such a privilege when you're able to create space for someone and they're able to externally process or be vulnerable or, really trust you to help them kind of figure out something, and just collaborate on something. So I've just been fascinated by that. And I also myself, I dealt with a lot of performance anxiety as an athlete. And really kind of, I just have a really a soft spot for people, not only athletes, but people that they kind of are just entrapped in that black or white thinking, that all or nothing thinking, because it's pretty debilitating. And you have these big goals and you have these, you can get there, you've done it, you've proven it to yourself, but it's about that execution, whether it's on the field or in the boardroom or just even in conversations with people. So I also love the variety of it. Like, I love the variety that this field has already, I've had the privilege of like engaging in. So whether that's just private practice or working overseas or working with juvenile court or with educators or grief and loss, like I just love the variety that it provides too. So it's been such an amazing journey so far.
Hey, I love that. And I'm glad you mentioned the performance anxiety part of it as well. So what are some techniques to deal with performance anxiety? Like, I know I have my breath and stuff like that. Well, I'll just kind of take my breath and hold it for a few seconds. And it kind of allows space for things to come down a little bit. It's kind of like letting a little bit of the water out, like the water level just sinks a little bit, and it helps me be able to move forward and not be stationary or just freeze. So what are some techniques to deal with that?
Yeah. And that's amazing. And I bet too, you've really, with breath, you have to get your reps in with that too. Like sometimes
Mhm.
out of the gate, it's like when people are like, just breathe. You're like, oh, hell no, that's not going to do anything. You have to really practice it and almost like get in shape with that. And kind of build that trust that is a way, and that's a something that you can do to soothe. So that's amazing. And I share that because a lot of times, people will say, just breathe. That's not going to work. And it may not the first time. Just like if you have never ran a day in your life and you try to go out and run a marathon, it's not going to work the first time. Like you have to train, you have to get those reps in, and breath work is amazing with that. And I think the biggest thing that I would share is, for me, especially, growing up and even specifically as an athlete, and I work with a lot of athletes now who are told when they're suffering from kind of performance anxiety or just that fierce inner critic, that people are telling them like, just don't worry about it. Just smile. Just play harder. Just distract yourself. Just listen to good music. Just before the game, just do this and that. So it's really this kind of Band-Aid approach of like, just put a Band-Aid on it or just distract yourself. And that all sounds good, an hour or two before the game. You're like, oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, that sounds good. But then when it's time to execute it and you're in that situation, all the floodgates are open. And it's like those things that, you wish you could just not think about it. That doesn't work. Right. And so it's really, I think, reframing and thinking about, like we were talking about before, like those are protective parts. Those are bodyguards coming into play and working too hard and kind of sharing the what ifs and this fear of failure and kind of driving you by fear. And it's really understanding and almost anticipating that these parts are probably going to show up. They get, less loud maybe as time goes on, but they're showing up because you care about this. You're passionate about this. You're stepping into something, whether it's a meeting or a game or whatever, that's a little unknown, right? And you have to perform. And so it's acknowledging and validating that. And I think now, even when I speak or when I do something, my critic is there and she's quite loud sometimes. And instead of like just distracting myself or being like, what the heck's wrong with me? I think now I've learned to just almost welcome that part of me and just be like, hey, I thought you'd show up. Thanks for being here. We signed up for this. And we've done this before, and we're generally nervous the first few minutes. We have the adrenaline pumping. We care about this, but we like to do this. This is something that is not life or death. And so if you could stick around because I need you, you're a good team member, but also move over because we got other team members that need to play too. And so I think I'm inviting you to talk to yourself. I'm inviting you to like engage and soothe that part of yourself rather than distract and put a Band-Aid on it. Because when we do that, those parts get creative. Those parts get louder and they visit us at times of the day or night when we want to access peace and presence, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, it absolutely can be, because that performance, like I even have performance anxiety before I go into the therapy session. Like, I used to be so super nervous. I like my heart be racing and everything's going through my head. And like, what if the therapist judges me? What judges me? What if he kicks me out of here if I say something wrong? Right? What if they send me to the insane asylum because I say something wrong? I used to have to take a shot before I go into therapy. I used to have to take a couple of shots just to bring the level down. And I got to the point I was like, this is insane. I was like, what am I doing? This doesn't work. So I found out like doing the breath work and things like that has helped me just as much as the couple of shots of alcohol used to. And also I had to process what I'm actually going up against. So like, what am I actually facing here? Is this some insurmountable beast, or is it just, somebody that I'm going to for help in situations like that? So I have to actually validate what I'm facing and what I'm going against in order to just personalize it, to humanize it and whatnot, not make it seem like there's this mountain I can't climb and whatnot as well. Because I think a lot of people do that. They don't, like you just said, they put a Band-Aid on it or they try to bury it down deep. And I tell people, like, you're not really burying it, you're planting it. So it's like you just said earlier, it's going to come back out later on. Like when you plant stuff, you might not realize you planted it. It's just like, who planted the pumpkin over here? Like, where's these tomatoes coming from? Like, it's going to come up later on when you're trying to go to sleep, when you're looking for that peace, like you said. You're going to have to deal with it sooner or later. So you rather deal with it right now as opposed to battling it later on when you're trying to look for that peace. When you like, after the performance is over, I got through it. Okay, great. And then you're trying to go to sleep and it's like, what about this happening? And you stay up and you're kind of just battling your demons before you go to sleep. And, it leads to more anxiety later on because now you don't get enough rest and now you're, battling stuff like that. So I think it's important, like what you just said, to deal with it right now as opposed to later on, because when it pops up later on, or you can be ready to deal with it then. So
That's
I feel like
right.
that's big, because I have battled that like time and time again, where I've literally planted something and I'll be getting ready to go to bed, and then my peace, bing, it's like the light, it's like literally a mental light comes on, like what's that bright light? And it's something that I was battling earlier on that I could have dealt with, that I just tried to push down, and that tis the heaven right there. It's a while. My mind just. That's why I love doing the therapy, and I love doing the inner work, because, like you said, it's always something new. It's a different battle. It's not boring, whatnot. So I love it, and I love using that to kind of help other people as well, which I think you do too. I think you on your own journey right now have helped out a lot of people, because you had, what was it, 20,000 sessions, which is I was like, I was trying to do the math. I was like 20,000. I was like, goodness gracious. And I know you've dealt with so many people in that time right there. I know you've been using that knowledge and things like that, because I was going through your site and it said you work with Fortune 500 companies, but also the nonprofits. Like, how does that work for you?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's it's a rush, because it's really, again, almost like individual therapy. You're really meeting the person where they're at, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the same thing with teams and companies and nonprofits. It's just really, it's not scripted. It's, there's tendencies, there's things that you'll see, and commonalities and patterns that, sometimes, as just a clinician, I'll see with individuals kind of going through similar things, but everybody has their own flavor. Everybody has their own spot, and things that their strengths, and then things that are hurdles. And I think it's really just kind of that macro level assessment when it comes to working with teams and organizations. So it's been kind of replicating the privilege of being kind of that individual, and the intimacy of an individual therapist, and kind of expanding that to bigger groups.
So do you think there's a difference between working with the Fortune 500 companies and the nonprofits? Is there a difference between those, or just like similar mindsets and just different scales or whatnot?
Well, it's very different, I think. And again, it's every company, every team has their own individual, again, recipe, flavor, what have you. But I think just the bigger companies seem to have just more access to resources, right? Mm-hmm. More funding, more layers, more things to delegate. There's always like two people behind a task. And I feel like with the nonprofit, it's just been such a hard, for a long time, just a hard setup, because resources are low. Burnout is very prevalent in such different ways. And, pay is low, and kind of that. Talk about fear center pleasers and fear center rescuers. I mean, people tend to be in the nonprofit sector, have just huge amounts of empathy and compassion. And so they're very prone to serial fixing and overextending, and just taking care of everyone else and not leaving enough space for themselves. So there are some similarities, but I think the setups of both of those things are just vastly different.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad you mentioned burnout, though, because that's one of my questions that I had right there. Like you said, a lot of people in the nonprofit sector experience burnout. I'm pretty sure the people in Fortune 500 companies experience it as well. What are some methods for managing that burnout?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's rampant. It's kind of everywhere. And I do think a lot of it is just, I've just seen this pattern. And again, guilty of it. I'm guilty of it too, is that we are like trying to capitalize on every crack and crevice and pause and transition in our day with like something productive. And what I mean by that is, like, you think about transitioning from one physical location to another, from hell, even one room in your house or apartment to another. And it's like, we are then like, oh, let me check my email. Let me do this. Let me see if there's a news update. Let me see this. Let me do that. Like, we're constantly multitasking and consuming, because I think it's feeding that part of our brain that's like, you better be productive. You better get all this done so that you can relax later. And then when it comes to relaxing, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how. We're out of shape when it comes to just like being present, that we have to kind of pacify ourselves with more. And so I think it's just this constant consuming, constant, surplus of information and multitasking, that you can see where that is exhausting to even just say and think about now. And, I've really tried to tell people that when it comes to self-care, if you would just capitalize on even like a quarter of your transitions during the day, again, whether that's just moving from one room to the next, one location, being in your car, transitioning roles, conversations, whatever it is, if you would use those and view those as micro resets and just time that you can take that deep breath, that you can tap into your five senses and think, what do I see? What do I hear? What's around me? How's the day looking? Where am I at? Doing a body scan, just like being present for 30 seconds or 3 minutes. That starts to almost clear proactively our internal clutter so that our brains and bodies are not left to all that at 2 a.m., when we're up in the night thinking about all this stuff that we're like, seriously? And so I think it's training ourselves when we're at stoplights to just look around rather than pull out our phone and see if someone messaged us in the last 30 seconds, and taking those opportunities to clear our own clutter. That is tremendously effective when it comes to burnout prevention and self-care and just managing our stress and self-connection.
So it sounds like exactly what I do. Because right now, like even in my office right now, I have to disconnect because I feel like I'm burning out sometimes. So I bought this little timer off of Amazon. So I'll put everything on do not disturb. I'll take my Apple Watch off so I don't get, because sometimes when I'm meditating, that'll throw you off. So I'll set my little timer right here for like 10 minutes and I'll just disconnect and whatnot just to be able to just, breathe and just kind of analyze and things like that, because I think society is so connected to our phones and things like that and information, and it's just hard to do that. So is that what a micro reset is? 'Cause I heard you mention that and whatnot. So micro resets help you with the burnouts, right?
Absolutely. And it is. I mean, I think, as humans, when we feel most alive is like when we're present. And even if it's hard stuff, but we are actually able to be in the space, be with the person, be with the situation, and not just have all this internal chatter that's not necessarily focused on the here and now. I mean, I think so many of us are out of shape with that. It seems like this foreign thing, and you can see where that's so taxing on the brain. And so it's kind of practicing and getting reps in with just, like you said, setting these boundaries and just being present with one thing at a time. We can't do that all the time, but when we do have control over that, really capitalizing on that. It's so good for the brain to maintain that focus and to get things done from start to finish. And I just don't feel like we're getting enough of that. And we're all over the map. We're all over the place. And there's things that are left open-ended, or we're distracted, or we have to do this. And it's just creating this like high urgent state that is really hard to come down from.
No. So when you said focus on one thing, my mind immediately jumped to like the phrase, you can't chase two rabbits and whatnot. It was because so many people are trying to do multitask and do so many things at once. But when I kind of like analogize it and like chasing two rabbits, you can't focus on, you can't give your full attention to multiple things. It's almost impossible to do that. And I feel like that can also lead to burnout, and could require you to find ways to micro reset, or just to kind of, set those healthy boundaries, not only on other people, but within yourself as well. Right. So, how can someone build those healthy boundaries that you brought up, that you mentioned?
Mm-hmm. I do. I mean, I think too, just if you take nothing away, think about like, how can I capitalize and kind of view a few of my transitions throughout the day as micro resets? How can I practice and get in shape with like just being with me, just being present, just being with the person? And you'll learn pretty quick, like where your deficits are, like where you need to get in shape with that. Like if you're like, I can't focus on anything, it's like, okay, that's all right. Like get some practice with it. So I think that's one of the big things. And I would also suggest, like, a lot of people love this framework of kind of like looking at your day with bookends, kind of having an AM bookend and a PM bookend, where you start your day with something that is for you, where you're not multitasking. And this can mean a number of things. This could be a workout. This could be meditation, prayer. This could be like cuddling with your dog. This could be having your coffee without checking your email and like packing your lunch and doing 80 other things. Like this is something that is for you, that you are present with, that you view as like something that is preparing your mind, body, and soul for the day. And you're giving yourself the privilege of engaging with it. And then, kind of having something in the evening that's yours as well. And it really confirms that like between these two bookends is your day, which can sometimes be chaotic and unknown and very bumpy, but we get through it. And sometimes not gracefully, but we get through it. And there's some other bookend. There's a PM bookend waiting for us on the other side of it. And that's a time maybe to validate, like, whoa, that was a lot. I got through it. I wish I could have a do-over, but I didn't, but I got through it. Like I've got through all the other days and I never have to do that day again. Or it's just like, I kicked ass. Like that was great. And so it's like having these moments that are carved out for you. And it's taking things that you might already do in your day and just simplifying them. and viewing them and really building this association with like, this is mine. This is predictable. I benefit from this. And that's huge. Those are huge.
Yeah, that is absolutely huge. I think it's super important what you mentioned as well about being present. I think so many people lack that, they lack the presence just in the world because it's so easy to not be present. Like, well, I think I heard the term doom scrolling the other day, where people just get on TikTok or something like that, and you're like, huh? Why is it dark outside? You've been sitting there for like hours you've been sitting there for hours and not realizing that life is passing you by. And that can be frustrating as well. That's one of those things that happens to me. I'll try to be present in the moment, but I'm like, okay, let me take a break real quick. Let me micro reset. Let me chill for a minute. And I'll find myself scrolling, and then I'll like, oh, I've been scrolling for too long. Now I'm angry at myself because now I'm not perfect. So now I'm mad at myself. So now I'm shutting down because I messed up. You say I'm just that being present, having those bookends are important because I find myself doing it literally all the time, but I'm in this space right now because I've done so much work where I understand it. I try, I mean, it's impossible sometimes, but like, I try not to be so hard on myself because I feel like if I call it an emotional black eye. If I beat myself up, I give myself an emotional black eye, and it's hard for me to see what's actually going on realistically, so I've had to kind of work on that on my own, just being present, but not beating myself up, not hammering away at myself. And I think that's really, really important as people keep moving forward. And I saw on your site too, you mentioned a lot about emotional intelligence. How is that important in not only what you do, just in the world in general?
Yeah. I mean, again, emotional intelligence can take a lot of forms, but I do think it is that ability to be present and that ability to kind of understand what's going on around you, how people might be responding to you or their situation. Also, like meeting people where they're at. And that's the biggest thing. I think I really do a lot of trainings on, giving feedback, receiving feedback, communication. And so much of us, especially in leadership positions or just even in parental positions or, positions roles in life where we're trying to lead or nurture or empower, like so many of us are jumping into fix and solve too prematurely. And we're going into this like problem solving. Let me take ownership of this. Let me untangle this for you and give it back to you all neatly packaged. And now you execute. And we know as well as I do, like you can give the best advice repeatedly to someone and they won't execute it unless they have their own flavor with it, unless they have their ownership with it. And so I think, EQ and emotional intelligence is also knowing like when to pause and how to be in that supporter role versus that solver role and let people get their own reps in and empower and lead with empathy. But so many of us are just serial fixing left and right. And it's not only exhausting us, but it's creating kind of these codependencies. And I think almost neglecting and omitting the opportunity for people that we work with, that we parent, that we are partners with to get their own reps in and build that self-trust within.
Yeah, I think that's like you said a lot of good things right there. I think everything you just said is extremely important right there. And I think this is like a lot of people get into these spaces and whatnot where we lack emotional intelligence, like me specifically. I think because of things that did happen in childhood and just trauma reactions and things of that nature. I'm 40 years old physically, but emotionally, I was probably like 10 or 11 years old, right? I've had to work on building that emotional intelligence and the emotional understanding throughout the years of therapy and just not even outside of therapy, right? Just learn how to manage my own behaviors and my own actions and my own thoughts in a healthy, positive way that is not only not self-destructive, but not other destructive as well. I'm not destroying other people because of my lack of emotional intelligence. Just not for self, but for other people as well, my kids and just anybody in my environment. And I think so many people, especially nowadays, lack that emotional intelligence. And I think so many people have so many different definitions of emotional intelligence. And you mentioned EQ. What is EQ? I wrote that down. Like, what is the EQ?
Yeah, kind of the abbreviation for emotional intelligence, right? your IQ, your EQ. Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of that slang, I guess you could say, for emotional intelligence. But you made a great point too about like, just being able to really emotionally regulate in the moment, because I think so much of us, we do operate on such a fast pace that we make assumptions too quickly. Someone says something and we're off to the races, or we make an association or make it about us or a deficit we have or our story or what we know about it. And that's where I think we're missing the ball. And I do think it's a matter of just pausing and keeping ownership and really refraining from jumping in and making assumptions, because that can be so damaging. And I know I use this a lot as a clinician, but I really try to use it in other roles in my life where someone might say something and I'm like, ooh, that was a little triggering, or ooh, what? Yeah. And instead of just shutting down or, getting defensive or just creating and filling all these crevices and making assumptions, I've really tried to practice, tell me more about that, or keep going, or can you explain that? Keep going. I'm interested. That right there, I need more information. I don't need to leave it to my own devices with this one sentence or one little statement for me to then fill in the gaps, because it's probably not going to end well for me or that person or the relationship. So it is about kind of those statements when you feel a little ignited. It's how can I pause, use my emotional intelligence and say, you tell me more about that, or keep going. Yeah, no, this is interesting. Or can you explain that differently? That gives you more, right? And that's a helpful technique, I think, on any front.
I've had to actually work on that a lot in my own life as well. Just, I call it slowing myself down so I don't give those overreactions or just the wrong reaction or the wrong response to something because I misunderstood it or I mistook it as criticism. Somebody's saying something to me and I take it as a personal attack, and now I'm attacking them, and they'll say something like, why are you so angry? I didn't mean it that way. Why would you take it that way? Why you pop off the handle? Why you just go crazy? And now I'm embarrassed. You see, now I got to face the shame of going off and overreacting because I mistook something. So I've had to work on the art of slowing myself down, which again, kind of goes into those micro resets, which again, kind of works in my breath work, because I had to okay, let me take a deep breath before I respond. I have to ask myself these internal questions. Is this person attacking me? Am I misunderstanding this situation? Is this, and it allows me to come from a different place. Like you said, of ownership and just of accountability. So I'm not wrong. I could still be wrong, right? I'm not always gonna be right, but it's helped me being able to slow myself down in my own interpersonal relationships and business relationships and things like that as well, as to where I was when I was younger, super reactionary because I would just misunderstand things and I thought people were attacking me. Now I'm just is this person attacking me? Even if they are attacking me, I don't have to respond over the top. I can still respond in kind and just remove myself from the situation, as opposed to, maybe harming my reputation by flying off the handle, because, everybody put their phones out, you get recorded saying something unnecessary and just
Yeah.
and things like that. So I feel like I've absolutely had to work on the art of slowing myself down, even to a snail's pace. Sometimes I have to tell my wife, look, if we're having some type of healthy conflict or whatever, if I'm taking a little while to respond, it's not because I'm being disrespectful. It's because I have to slow myself down so I don't say something rude or disrespectful to you. And now I regret it later on. I'm it's blown, it's blown way out of proportion than what it actually should have been or what it needed to be. And it's kind of wild. So I'm glad you said that right there. So talk to me about the importance of caring for your mind.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's just the same as, caring for our bodies, right? I mean, this is our vessel. This is how we process information. This is how we relate. This is how we move through the world. And I think it's just, thinking about our mental and emotional well-being starts with kind of the relationship we have with ourselves, right? And really understanding kind of when those internal bodyguards are on high alert, when we are, in need of a reset or just a break. And I think it's, so many of us are not really engaging in consistent check-ins, just with ourselves, of just kind of taking that little inventory or protocol of how am I doing? What's going on? How's my sleep been? How's this? And just collecting our own data and then using that to care for ourselves proactively. Because if not, that's when the shit hits the fan. And that's when our bodies and minds get frustrated and they're you're not taking care of anything here. So it's left to us. And that's when you kind of have that internal balloon pop. That's when you have that, explosion. That's when you have that injury. That's when you get sick. That's when your body and mind are kind of all right, we're on your team, but if you're not going to help us out, we got to clear the clutter somehow. So it is about finding these opportunities consistently to check in with yourself, to take care of yourself, to add yourself to the equation. And that is self-care. It's not all or nothing. It's not these big weekends where you're like, yay, spa weekend. Those are great. But it's more about the consistency and the everyday maintenance, just like it takes to physically stay in shape.
I think I love how you just said that though, about how it's not always a spa weekend or something like that. It's like daily maintenance that is necessary, as opposed to because I think when people think of self-care, they do think of like those over the top kind of grandiose things. Like, well, you know what? I do need a trip. But what happens when you come back from the trip? Well, sometimes even on the trip, like sometimes like your problems travel, they travel and carry on. They first class. So they travel with you. So it's just like, I think that daily maintenance is absolutely important because like I've done it. I've been sad and tried to take a trip. But like now I'm just sad on the trip, so just like, so it's just like, I think it's absolutely important to handle stuff on a daily basis as opposed to kind of letting it pile up, because it absolutely will, like I say, it will hop on your carry-on or into your luggage or whatever, and it will come with you. Or it builds up to one of those knots at a spa massage and whatnot. Like, a big knot in your back, or your neck. A lot of tension here. They try to massage it out, but you can't massage out those internal things, those the emotional stuff and whatnot. So I think that daily maintenance is absolutely important. I'm glad you said that. My mind just works in like my mind works in like TikTok.
No, I love it. I love it.
I doom scroll. I see images and movies in my mind when you're talking. I was like, oh, that's how it looks, and that's how my mind it's always moving. It's very interesting and whatnot. So talk to me a little bit about overextending yourself in relationships.
Yes. I mean, I refer to it a lot as serial fixing, right? You're constantly putting yourself in the role of the fixer and the solver. And it's, kind of it's just challenging to kind of maintain and even notice when you need to set those boundaries and keep the ownership with people. So you'll kind of see maybe those internal bodyguards like the critic or the pleaser popping up, and you're constantly saying yes to things. You're constantly 2 steps ahead. You're constantly trying to fix and solve for other people, because if they're okay, then you can be okay. And so a lot of times it looks like compassion, but sometimes it's our own discomfort in disguise, right? So I think a lot of it is, overextension. Really, we got to make peace, and we got to really be aligned with what are the internal drivers or bodyguards that are really pushing us to fix, to solve, to overextend. What are we trying to do here? Who are we trying to please? What are we trying to avoid? What are we trying to, what's the goal in this? And I think those types of conversations with ourselves really help us break some of those patterns.
Yeah, I love how you said, what are we trying to avoid too? Because I think when people, like I said, they hear serial fixer, they are thinking about like fixing things, like dealing with something right now, but not necessarily the avoidance part of it. Because sometimes people are trying to fix things and overextending themselves in relationships because they're trying to avoid something, whether it be a conversation, some type of conflict, breaking up with somebody, moving on, whatever the case may be. I think a lot of people are trying to avoid that type of stuff right there. And they end up overextending themselves and just kind of falling. It is wild. Like my mind just like, when you said that, I was like, yeah, avoid, like, especially like I say in my own life as well, avoiding certain things can lead to me overextending in other relationships as well. And it's just like, it's a cycle. It can be very cyclical in these situations for people to deal with. And I feel like all that kind of ties in together. You overextend yourself, leads to burnout, and now you got the micro reset, and then now you have the performance anxiety. It's all like a big cycle right there. Do you think it kind of fits in together like that, being in a cycle?
It is. It is. And it's not a way to like then for the listeners to be like, oh my God, it's too overwhelming. Where do we start? But it's just, it speaks to just, everything is impacting everything else, just like, physically with our physical health. And so it's not again about perfection, but it's about understanding and collecting some of these data points that our mind and body are giving us and responding to them. If we're constantly feeling exhausted or resentful, or just like, I'm working so hard to build these connections with people and I'm feeling lonely, like, what the heck, this isn't working. And I think those are opportunities to really take a step back and see what roles you're occupying, what patterns you're, fueling, and really what is it preventing you or what are you avoiding, probably from within. If we're so productive and have these roles kind of designed and structured externally with people that we love, people that we lead, people that we care for, it really kind of gives us that boost or that checkpoint of like, see, I'm productive. See, I'm needed. See, this was good. And that keeps us kind of out of here because this is overwhelming. Dealing with our own stuff is overwhelming, but it's necessary. But you can see where people overextend and they keep themselves busy and needed externally to just convince themselves like, see, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, but I don't have time for this. And that's where we get the backlash.
Again, my mind it'd be bouncing around everywhere. So when you were talking and you said how it can affect you physically, like how things tie in together physically, I think about the body chain and how your knees connected to your elbow and all the other stuff. It's kind of like an emotional body chain, right? Like an emotional chain, like everything is tied in together. If you mess up with this one thing, it's going to affect something else later on. If you don't deal with this right now, it's going to affect something else later on. Like if you don't deal with this emotional conflict or this anxiety right now, it's going to come up later on in the situation where it could hamper you, it could hinder you, it could make you shut down. It's kind of all tied in together. And I think I was like, feel my mind thinking. I was like, all this stuff is tied in together. It's very, very interesting. So tell me about your book, The Serial Fixer, or Serial Fixer, not The Serial Fixer, Serial Fixer just in general.
No, thank you. Yeah, it is. It's called Serial Fixer, Break Free from the Habit of Solving Other People's Problems. And it kind of goes, at a deeper level of a lot of the things we talked about today, right? Kind of those internal boundaries and self-awareness, and how that impacts kind of our relationships and our ability to take care of ourselves and set external boundaries. And really that role and that kind of tendency and pattern that many of us find ourselves in, where we are looking to fix and solve and soothe, sometimes prematurely and sometimes for a need to kind of, mask our own discomfort. So I'm hoping that it's a good resource for people, especially people that lead with a lot of empathy and compassion, and tend to not leave a lot for themselves.
Yeah, that's even the title of it is impactful. And it says serial fixer, break free from the habit of solving other people's problems, which it kind of is, again, is that sometimes we could be focused on other people's problems because we're avoiding our own. You're avoiding like the main thing that's going on. So you're trying to fix everybody else's stuff. And I think that's extremely important, especially with the people that I deal with, just in my, I guess, my niche of, dealing with victims of domestic violence and narcissistic abuse, toxic emotional abuse. I think that'll be very impactful. And you can find that on Amazon on November the 11th. It's coming out, or everywhere. It is coming out everywhere. I've seen you can pre-order it now, but it's coming out everywhere. So I will definitely be reading that. I'm super interested in it. I was like, oh, wait, other people's problems. Because I learned about this type of stuff. I use that to help other people as well. I was just like, which is why I seriously enjoyed talking to you today and getting that viewpoint and whatnot. And you also have a TEDx coming up as well. Can you share anything about that coming up?
I do. I have a TEDx coming up in Charlotte on November 8th, right before the book launches the week after. And it is, of course, it's about serial fixing, right? And the subtitle for that is what people are really avoiding in relationships. And so, yeah, as you can see, I'm all about the serial fixer train right now and just really educating people and giving people a framework to work with and improve their relationships with others, including themselves. So, yeah. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Hey, so what are people avoiding in relationships? just thought.
Oh my gosh.
Out of my head. You don't have to go into great detail. What do you feel like one of the main things is that people are avoiding in relationships?
I think it's again, like most of us as humans, it's that discomfort. It's that kind of that going into a very vulnerable and intimate, level and feeling like you're not going to be able to execute. Feeling like if you open yourself up, that then is going to go away. And not having that confidence sometimes and self-trust that you can kind of get to those levels. And so again, it's like overextending, serial fixing, doing X, Y, and Z. And if everybody else is okay, then I can be okay. And it's really avoiding, I think, the real true internal work and vulnerability and intimacy that sometimes is really necessary to establish those true connections that I think most of us are after.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I know a lot of people have a lot of different like opinions on what people avoid in relationships, but nobody, it doesn't mean anybody is wrong in that situation right there. But I think what you just said is super powerful, because I typically deal with people that are in toxic relationship dynamics and people, who have similar mentalities as myself. And I tend to ask them, well, what are you running away from? What is this? What is the actual issue right here? What is the actual problem? I talked to a woman earlier today, and she was just, her problem was she just didn't want to deal with the shame that she was facing if she left the relationship, so she was trying to overextend herself to make it work and trying to avoid certain things and getting cheated on, all kinds of stuff. And I was just like, So is there anything else we want to share with the folks and whatnot, with the audience? Because I've had a great conversation with you. I appreciate this perspective. I was like, you've got my wheels turned out. I've been taking notes. I'm like,
I love it. I love it. No, it's been really fun. It flew by. No, I think if people would love to connect with me, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube. I'm just kind of on a lot of the social platforms. If you want to connect. And then of course, if you do get the book, I'd love to hear what you think. I hope it's helpful. I mean, really my main goal is to just generate more self-awareness. So feel free to reach out and connect with me, and I'd love your feedback. And I really appreciate the opportunity and having me on.
No, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I'll link out all your sites and whatnot, the book and all the other good stuff as well. You can find more from Leah at leahmarone.com. That's her website. Leah Marone, LCSW, on Instagram. Is that get the initials right?
Yeah, you're good.
LC. Okay, that's what I was like. Licensed. I was like, I don't want to flub. I'll beat myself up as soon as I hop off the camera.
Good. Recover. You're recovering beautifully.
All right. Thank you so much for hopping on with me and sharing this with me today. I truly appreciate you coming on here. I've had a very, my mind is turning. I was like, the wheels are turning. I will be getting your book and reading your book and whatnot. You'll see a review from Lee on there. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. Thank you so much. And we will chat later.
Thanks.